transport across the cell membrane. As you know, the cell membrane is phospholipid bilayer and is more permeable to lipid soluble substances, but each type of cellular transport is semi-permeable and regulated and is governed by different types of cellular transport mechanisms. Broadly divided into passive and active transport mechanisms require or do not require energy based upon that. So among the passive transport, we have simple and facilitated diffusion and osmosis, whereas active transport is further of primary and secondary active transport types and vesicular transport. In this session, we will be looking into the detail of simple and facilitated diffusion as well as primary and secondary active transport mechanism. So starting from the passive transport, the basic two requirements of the passive transport include movement from a high to a low concentration and without the use of energy. These two are the basic requirements for any type of the passive transport, may it be simple or facilitated diffusion or the osmosis. So transport of a substance from higher to lower concentration downhill without expenditure of energy is passive transport, which is further of three types: simple and facilitated diffusion as well as osmosis. Whereas active transport, the basic two requirements is the movement from low to a high concentration, and that will necessarily require the utilization of energy in the form of ATP. The need of energy in the active transport is for the movement of substance against the concentration gradient, and this ATP is provided by the mitochondria, of course, and this will be utilized by the channel proteins, or we call them pumps as well. For example, the sodium potassium pump, an example of primary active transport mechanism. So how do these channel proteins help in the primary active transport? We will understand with the help of this flowchart. First of all, the protein which is helping in this type of transport, active transport or the secondary active transport or maybe the primary active transport, we call it a carrier protein. This is different from the channel protein. We will see the difference in a while during this session. But right now, just understand this is the carrier protein which is providing the regulated active transport of a substance across the cell membrane. So this flowchart is showing the primary active transport of this substance from its low to the higher concentration. The concentration gradient is in the opposite direction, but the substance wants to move in the other direction from a low to the higher concentration with the help of this carrier protein and with the help of the ATP. So first of all, what will happen? The ATP will be utilized and hydrolyzed into ATP and phosphate, and while doing this hydrolysis, the energy will be released, which will be utilized by this molecule to be transported. As soon as the energy becomes available, this molecule to be transported will bind to its binding site on this carrier protein. As soon as it binds to this site, there will be a conformational change. As you can see, the shape of this carrier protein has changed from this to this, and we call it a conformational change, and that was brought about by the stored energy in the molecule by the hydrolysis of the ATP. Now, as soon as this conformational change occurs, the molecule will be released, and as this is facing towards the outside, it will be released towards the ECF, which is having already a higher concentration of that molecule. And as soon as it will be released, the carrier protein will return back to its original conformation. So simply by utilization of energy from this ATP, this molecule was transported from its low to its high concentration by the conformational change of this carrier protein. So this type of active transport can be of primary active transport type or secondary active transport type. The only difference between the two is the source of ATP. Rest two conditions are same. They require energy and they move substance from low to high concentration. Now the difference is the source of ATP. If it is being used directly, we call it primary active transport, and if it is using indirect energy of the ATP, we call it secondary active transport. How is it indirect? We will see in a while. So starting from the Prototype example of the primary active transport, which is sodium potassium pump, present on all the cells of the body, which is transporting 3 sodium ions to the outside and 2 potassium ions to the inside of the cell, and both against their concentration gradient. We also call it a sodium potassium pump, which is involving this carrier protein for movement of sodium and potassium against their concentration gradient. Otherwise, the gradient of sodium movement is from outside to inside and potassium is from inside to outside. Whereas sodium potassium pump is maintaining this gradient by sending more sodium to outside, a high concentration area, and potassium to inside, again its high concentration area, by the utilization of this ATP. If you look into the structure of this ATP, you can appreciate there are two subunits. One is the larger subunit, which is providing the attachment and movement to sodium and potassium. And the other one is relatively smaller subunit, which has its regulatory and supportive role in the structural integrity and functioning of the sodium potassium pump. All other binding sites are present on the sodium potassium pump, including the binding sites for sodium, binding site for potassium, binding site for ATP and its ATPase enzyme. So sodium potassium ATPase catalyzes the hydrolysis of ATP to extrude 3 sodium outside and 2 potassium inside. It is an electrogenic pump as it is exporting 3 cations outside and in return only 2 cations inside, because of which there is going to be more cations outside and less cations inside, ultimately resulting in this potential difference, inside becoming more negative. It is a heterodimer made up of an alpha and a beta subunit. The larger one is alpha and the smaller one is beta subunit. Sodium and potassium transport occurs this alpha subunit. This subunit has a sodium binding site, ATP binding site, a phosphorylation site, and an extracellular potassium binding site. These 3 sites, sodium, ATP, and phosphorylation sites, are intracellular. Potassium binding sites is extracellular, and there is another binding site on the extracellular surface, which is digitalis binding site. So let's see how does this sodium potassium ATPase pump work. You can see the attachment site of 3 sodium and 2 potassium molecule. Inside is the lower concentration of sodium and outside is the lower concentration of potassium. As soon as the ATP is hydrolyzed and energy is available, 3 sodium ions from inside will attach to this carrier protein. This will bring about a conformational change. As soon as the conformational change will occur, this is open to outside, sodium will be released to the extracellular fluid, and the potassium ions rather will bind to their binding sites right now from this area of their low concentration. Now there would be the reverse conformational change and the potassium now will be released into the intracellular fluid and the carrier protein has returned back to its original configuration. So simply by the use of ATP and its energy, this sodium potassium pump shifted 3 sodium to the outside and 2 potassium to the inside. The rule is still the same. Use the energy from the ATP and had a conformational change of the carrier protein that moved the ions from their low to their high concentration. So this rule remains the same, either it is primary active transport or secondary active transport. Functions of sodium potassium pump, very important in the body. Each cell of the body is having this sodium potassium pump. 3 most important functions include maintenance of sodium and potassium gradient across the cell membrane. If this would not occur, all the sodium will move inside and potassium will move outside down their concentration gradients. What will happen next? If a lot of sodium moves inside, water will follow and the cell size will increase to an extent that it will rupture. So this sodium potassium concentration gradient maintenance is also helping in the maintenance of the cell volume. Also, this sodium potassium gradient is required for the maintenance of the resting membrane potential. Normally inside of the cell is more negative as compared to the outside, for example -70 to -90 millivolts. If this sodium potassium gradient is lost, this resting membrane potential will be lost and the excitable tissue will suffer. Third, this is an electrogenic pump and is helping in maintenance of this potential gradient across the membrane as well, which is necessarily required for the maintenance of membrane potential and the generation of the action potential as well. The pump action is regulated by neighboring factors, including some factors which increase its activity. Just a few examples like the cyclic AMP second messenger, thyroid hormones, aldosterone, and insulin will increase its activity, whereas it is going to be inhibited by the dopamine. Also, it is inhibited by the digitalis compounds like digoxin used in the treatment of the cardiac failure as well. Other examples of primary active transporters include calcium ATPase, like present on the renal tubules, hydrogen ATPase, like present on the renal tubules as well as the parietal cells of the stomach, hydrogen potassium ATPase, again present in the renal tubules. Now moving on towards the secondary active transport. This is again a movement from low to the high concentration. This also requires energy, but this is different from primary active transport as ATP is indirectly providing energy. So this ATP was directly provided energy to a primary active transporter, and the stored energy is now used by the secondary active transporter. So ATP provides energy indirectly. Rather, it uses the electrochemical gradient or membrane potential produced by a primary active transporter. For example, let's take the example of sodium potassium pump again. It pumped 3 sodium outside and 2 potassium inside and used the ATP. Now there is a stored concentration gradient as well as the potassium gradient. The sodium wants to move inside and potassium wants to move outside. If we let this happen, the concentration gradient movement of these ions will dissipate energy, and that energy will be captured by another carrier protein. For example, by this sodium glucose cotransporter, it wants to move sodium and glucose in this direction. Sodium will move down its concentration gradient, dissipate energy that will be captured by the glucose to move from its low to the high concentration. And this is how the indirect utilization of energy occurred, that captured the energy stored by a primary active transporter, either in the form of electrochemical gradient or in the form of potential gradient. This secondary active transport, as you can again see in this example, is capturing the energy produced by a primary active transport of sodium potassium pump. When sodium moved down the concentration gradient produced by the primary active transport, it dissipated energy, and that was captured by the glucose to move from its low to the high concentration. This is called as indirect use of energy in this secondary active transport. This secondary active transport can now be of two types: co-transport, or you can call it semport, and the other type is counter transport or antiport. So both are secondary active transports which are indirectly using the energy stored by a primary active transporter, but the difference is the direction of movement. If both the substances are moving in the same direction, we call it co-transport. If they are moving in the opposite direction, we label it a counter transport. Examples are in front of you. Sodium glucose is a co-transporter example, both sodium and glucose moving from outside to the inside. Sodium calcium is example of a counter transport mechanism. Let me show you the example. This is sodium and glucose co-transport, both moving from extracellular to the intracellular fluid, let's suppose. And this is showing the counter transport in which sodium is moving from outside to inside, whereas calcium is moving from inside to outside. Also, sodium hydrogen transport is an example of the counter transport. Let me clarify one thing over here. The same and opposite direction mean the outside or inside of the cell, not from the high to low or low to high concentration. As in case of either co-transport or counter transport, one of them will be moving down the concentration gradient, as you can see sodium. In both the cases moving down the concentration gradient, and the other ion in both the cases is moving against the concentration gradient. The labeling of co or counter is decided based upon from outside the cell or inside the cell. Both moving into the cell or out of the cell, we call it co-transport. One moving into the cell, other moving out of the cell, we call it counter-transport. Irrespective of co or counter-transport, one is moving down the concentration gradient, which is providing the indirect energy, and other is moving against the concentration gradient, which is utilizing and capturing that indirectly provided energy. This is summarizing the transports that we have just discussed. This is showing active transport with the help of a carrier protein against the concentration gradient. And this image is showing the passive transport, diffusion, which we are going to discuss in the next half of this session. Diffusion can be simple diffusion or facilitated diffusion. The simple diffusion for very small size and lipid soluble molecules can simply be across the phospholipid bilayer as appreciated over here. Or for polar molecules, it can be via a channel protein. This channel protein is providing a conduit or a passageway for the polarized molecules to pass, but both are moving down the gradient and without the utilization of energy. Whereas in case of facilitated diffusion, you can see again this is happening although down the concentration gradient, but this is requiring a carrier protein to occur. We will see the details of this in a while. So transporters across the cellular membrane, if we review them, these are of two types. Those for the lipid soluble, those for the water soluble. Lipid solubles can simply move through the tails of the phospholipid, whereas the water soluble substances will either require a carrier protein or a channel protein to pass. If the moving substance is moving via simple diffusion, it can use channels. For example, the pores, ungated channels like aquaporin, which are always open, or the gated channels, for example, those gated by voltage, those gated by chemical aspects, ligand gated, or affected by the post-translational modifications. These both types of channels are going to provide the passage to the polar water-soluble small-sized molecules which are moving by the simple diffusion. Examples of voltage-gated sodium channels include sodium voltage-gated sodium channels, voltage-gated calcium channels, mechanical-gated calcium channels, ligand-gated, for example, acetylcholine-gated channels. Whereas protein carriers are the vehicles for the transport of water-soluble, polar, and large-sized molecules, which are going to move by either facilitated diffusion or by the active transport. These protein carriers may be providing passage to one single substance, for example, by the uniports, like in case of facilitated diffusion, or in case of active transport, like calcium ATPase pump. And the symports will be involved in transport of more than one substance, for example, co-transport and counter-transport, sodium calcium exchanger, sodium glucose co-transporter, sodium amino acid co-transporter. So while we are discussing the types of cellular transport, we have quickly overviewed the types of cellular transporters, which can simply be the phospholipid bilayer for small lipid-soluble substances, which can be channel proteins for simple diffusion, which can be carrier protein for either facilitated diffusion or active transport, or a symporter for co or counter transport mechanisms. While we are discussing the channel versus carrier proteins, let's have a quick comparison of their characteristics. Both are integral proteins present across the cell membrane. Channel proteins are simply providing the watery spaces all the way, which is allowing for the free movement of the ions or molecules, which may be gated or non-gated. Whereas integral proteins are the molecules that have to bind to the moving substance, bring about a conformational change, and then move the substance across the cell membrane. Channel proteins do not attach to the transporting substance, rather they just provide a conduit. So rapidity will be of course less for the carrier proteins as they have to undergo a conformational change. Gating is the phenomenon of channel protein which can be open or closed, whereas carrier proteins are always available unless they are completely saturated. Channel proteins provide conduit only for the ions, whereas carrier proteins provide passage for the small polar molecules, for example, glucose. A few special characteristics of channel proteins. These are selective. The selective channels will only allow for the movement of certain ions. For example, cationic channels, for example, only sodium channels. Conductance that can vary depending upon the gating state, for example, the concentration gradient, for example, the potential gradient, and they can be open or closed depending upon the status of the gates. Whereas the special characteristics of carrier proteins include specificity. Like we said, selectivity for the channel proteins, we say specificity for the carrier proteins. Each carrier protein will be specific to a certain molecule, for example, for glucose, for example, for amino acid. Saturation, if there are limited number of carrier proteins available, let's just for example say there are 5 carrier proteins for transport of glucose on this cell membrane. There may come a time when all 5 are occupied by the glucose molecules. We will call this a saturated state, where increasing the concentration gradient more will not increase the rate of transport as all the carrier proteins have already become saturated. Lastly, the competition. Although these carrier proteins are specific for certain molecule, similar resembling molecule in the configuration can compete. For example, let's suppose there is a carrier protein which can only bind to glucose. So different isomers of glucose or dextrose, for example, will compete for attachment to this, or maybe a drug or an externally given chemical which resembles in configuration may compete for attachment to this carrier protein. Now we are going towards the discussion of the characteristics of simple and facilitated diffusion. Now, as we have seen the structure of the channel and the carrier proteins. In this image, you can see on the x-axis is the concentration of the substance, whereas on the y-axis there is a rate of diffusion. So this graph says, if we look at the blue curve, the more the concentration gradient of a substance, that is more the difference between inside and outside of the cell, faster will be the rate of diffusion. Let's suppose there are 100 sodium molecules outside and 10 sodium molecules inside. The rate of diffusion will be faster if there are 100 outside and 50 inside. So the more the gradient, the more is the rate of diffusion as seen in this blue curve. Whereas the red curve, this is showing the rate of facilitated diffusion. It also says the rate of facilitated diffusion is directly proportional to the concentration gradient, but that has a limit, after which the rate of facilitated diffusion will reach a plateau. Can you please appreciate what led to the plateau of this rate of facilitated diffusion? Yes, this is the phenomenon of saturation of carrier proteins. As simple diffusion did not involve any carrier protein, it went limitlessly increasing its velocity by increasing the rate of concentration gradient. Whereas in case of facilitated diffusion, up to a limit, the rate of facilitated diffusion will increase, after which when all the carrier proteins are occupied, there will be no more increase in the rate of facilitated diffusion, rather it will stay at its maximum value. And we call this point Vmax, that is maximum velocity of rate of facilitated diffusion. And this is the phenomena which is pertinent to only facilitated diffusion and does not apply to the simple diffusion. While we talk about the rate of simple diffusion, not only the concentration gradient is the one which affects the rate of diffusion, there are multiple other factors. Can you recall from your previous knowledge? One most important is, of course, concentration gradient, directly proportional. Second is surface area. More the surface area, more the rate of facilitated diffusion. More the lipid solubility, more the rate of facilitated diffusion. Molecular weight of the substance, this is what is inversely proportional. Higher the molecule, that will less will be the rate of simple diffusion. Distance it has to move again, this is inversely proportional. For example, thickness of the cell membrane, if increases from 10 nanometer to abnormally 20 nanometer, the substance has to move a larger distance and the rate of simple diffusion will decrease. It's again directly proportional to temperature and pressure. So these are the few factors which impact the rate of diffusion across a cell membrane for a lipid soluble substance. And if we combine them into one equation, we will call it a Fick's law. So we will start this discussion by having a look at this. The rate of simple diffusion is directly proportional to the concentration gradient, directly proportional to surface area, directly proportional to the lipid solubility, but inversely proportional to the molecular weight and inversely proportional to the distance it has to cover, while considering that temperature and pressure are kept constant. Next steps are showing the simplification of this relationship. If we look at this equation, there are certain factors which are related to the substance and some factors which are related to the cell membrane. So lipid solubility and molecular weight, these two are the characteristics of the moving substance. If we combine them into one factor, this is known as diffusion constant, and this is going to vary from substance to substance. For example, diffusion constant of glucose, diffusion constant of sodium, diffusion constant of oxygen versus carbon dioxide. These are the constant values which can be placed inside this equation to simplify. One more simplification step you can see over here. The distance the substance has to cover, that is the thickness of the cell membrane, is constant in average human cell unless there is a pathology. So if we also add this to this diffusion constant divided by the cell membrane thickness or the distance it has to cover, we will find another constant value which is permeability. So this permeability is again going to have a particular value for each of the involved substance. So if we replace 1, 2 and 3, these three by the permeability, we will have a simplified equation which involves the rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the concentration gradient, directly proportional to the surface area, and directly proportional to the permeability, whereas permeability means solubility divided by molecular weight and also divided by the distance it has to cover. So it has been simplified into three simple factors, and this is Fick's law, which states that the rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the concentration gradient, surface area and the permeability. Now that we have seen diffusion, we have seen facilitated diffusion, primary active transport and secondary active transport. We can have a comparison of these types of transport. Osmosis, we will be looking into the details of this in the next session on the cellular transport. And I hope you can now make up the differences based upon your knowledge you have just gained. For example, you can simply define them. You can compare the substances involved, which are small lipid soluble substances in case of simple diffusion, or maybe ions passing through the channel proteins. These are small polar molecules like glucose and amino acids in case of facilitated diffusion, only water in case of osmosis. Primary active transport is only for the ions, whereas small polar molecules are moved by the secondary active transport. Direction, you know, down the gradient in case of simple diffusion, passive diffusion, and against the gradient in case of active diffusion. Factors affecting the rate, Fick's law in case of diffusion, electrochemical gradient, and the Fick's law factors plus the number of carrier proteins in case of facilitated diffusion, osmotic pressure in case of osmosis. We'll see into the details in the next session. Number of carrier proteins and electrochemical gradient in case of the active transport. Proteins, channel versus carrier proteins needed or no need in case of simple diffusion. You can compare it. Source of energy, either no energy required, direct ATP or indirect ATP, we have discussed. Limit to the transport, diffusion will keep on occurring across the cell membrane until the concentration gradient is abolished. Same as that for facilitated diffusion, or maybe the V maximum is reached. Osmosis will continue until it is opposed by the hydrostatic pressure. Primary and secondary active transport will continue until all transporters have become saturated or the concentration gradient has abolished. So that's all about the active transport. Simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion will continue with the vesicular transport and the osmosis in the next session. And before we conclude, let me show you a brief overview of the patch clamp method, which is a technique using microelectrode for the studying of transport across a single channel protein. Here you can see a recording pipette is attached to the cell membrane over here, and the purpose is to look into the details of the transport across this channel protein. A tight contact between the pipette and the cell membrane, so only movement will be occurring across this channel protein now, and it will be studied. The patch clamp technique have various variations which can study the movement across a channel protein in different forms. For example, a cell attached recording method in which the patch clamp was applied and it was left over there, and no breach in the cell membrane integrity was produced while looking into the details of movement across this type of the channel proteins across various states. In addition to the whole cell recording method, there are other variations in which after attachment of the micropipette, the mild suction is applied and the channel protein is removed. Now the cytoplasm is continuous with the interior of the pipette. This is another variation of the patch clamp technique and we call it whole cell recording. Another variation in which this part of the cell membrane was sucked and the transport across this channel protein will now be studied on exposure to the exterior environment. Here the cytoplasmic domain of the channel protein is accessible. We call it inside out recording. Otherwise, the cytoplasmic site was unapproachable, which has now become approachable, and we can have electrolyte variations over this side and look into it. Lastly, if the suction is applied and a strong pulse of suction retract the cell membrane edges, and now the cell membrane outside surface is exposed, we call it outside out recording. So inside out, outside out, whole cell recording or cell attached recording are all the variations of the patch clamp technique, which can be used for the study of transport across the cell membrane across the different channel proteins. We will conclude by having a look at this few review questions. So what do you think? Which type of transport is requiring the expenditure of ATP? So only active transport over here is requiring ATP. I hope you can appreciate the types of transports occurring over here. A is passive transport. B is active transport as it is requiring energy. C is simple diffusion. D is showing a use of carrier protein while showing passive transport. So this is facilitated diffusion. And again, this is showing passive and primary and secondary active transport. So that's all. We will continue in the next session. Thank you.